Josh Heupel has been named to a list on 247. I guess the list season has already begun, and he has been listed as a top 10 football coach in the nation. Now, there's no real parameters put around this list that I can tell, other than they're just ranking the coaches. It's not based off age, which I would certainly take into account when we move forward and we start talking about other coaches that I want to delve into. But just when I first throw that at you, or as you first threw it at me, Heupel, who's rated number 10, is he a top 10 coach in the nation? What is your first response to that?
My first response is, I think right now, yes. Believe it or not, yes, I do. And I was looking at his list, and I was trying to figure out who would be ahead of him. He doesn't have a top 10 resume in the nation. He doesn't. We can agree on that. But are there more than 10 coaches I would take over Josh Heupel if I were starting a football program tomorrow? No.
Okay. Well, let's get into it now. It's Four Downs, brought to you by AndyMasonRealEstate.com, saving you thousands. AndyMasonRealEstate.com.
Four Downs. 4 questions. 4 answers. The Dave Hooker Show. Four Downs. A presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
Be sure and click that like button. If you haven't subscribed yet, do that. AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Over 40 years of experience will save you thousands. Best customer service. And how about the best service and prices in the biz? AndyMasonRealEstate.com. All right, so 4 questions about Josh Heupel and where he should rank among the top 10 coaches. Well, it's no great surprise that Kirby Smart and Nick Saban are ahead of him. I think you would expect that. Kirby Smart is number 1 in the nation, followed by Nick Saban, who's number 2. Do you have any sort of argument with that whatsoever after what Kirby Smart has done over the past couple of years in particular?
No, not at all. Those are clear-cut the top 2 coaches. I think it's right to even have Kirby Smart number 1, and people think that's crazy, but he just won 2 national championships, and Nick Saban is copying Kirby Smart with what he's going for on offense this year. So I think Kirby Smart's easily number 1 and Nick Saban's number 2.
I agree. And I thought Nick Saban, his defense underwhelmed a little bit last year as well. So I think there's that factor, and Kirby Smart's defense lost a lot and came back even better. So I will say that I think Kirby Smart is a notch above, and then it's a step down to Nick Saban. I know it sounds crazy to say that, but now if you want to go off resume, obviously we're having a totally different conversation. So that's first down. Got no problem with Smart being ahead of Saban. Second down, who is the top in the SEC other than Smart and Saban? In other words, would you take Brian Kelly over Josh Heupel? You've already said you would take Josh Heupel. I'm very, very close. I'm 55%, 45%, but I would take Brian Kelly because I think that Brian Kelly has accomplished more. I think what he did at Notre Dame is undervalued because I don't think you realize how much constraint you have as a head coach there. So right now, I would take Brian Kelly over Josh Heupel. We're probably having a way different conversation in 5 years, as Brian Kelly would be close to retirement, and I think Josh Heupel's star will continue to rise. But right now, I would take Brian Kelly over Josh Heupel. You said you would have Josh Heupel in the top 10. So would you have Kelly over Heupel, just to make sure?
No, I'm actually with you. I would have Kelly. I would have Brian Kelly over Josh Heupel.
Okay. I got my rankings confused, and I kind of put words in your mouth. Sorry about that.
No. Yeah, no, that's fine. Brian Kelly. Not only would I take Brian Kelly over Josh Heupel, I think there's a possibility that Heupel's a better coach. I do. I'm with you. I'm a little close, and I lean towards Brian Kelly. I'm pretty convinced that when they're both retired, Brian Kelly will walk out with a better resume. And I say that because, look, again, he's a coach with more than 4 brain cells at LSU. And that's all you need to win a national championship at LSU. And so I think that Brian Kelly is going to win a lot there. I drove the Brian Kelly train, Dave, just so you know, when Tennessee fired Philip Fulmer, I was big on them hiring Brian Kelly that year. Mike Hamilton went for the splash and Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin bolted the next year. Brian Kelly went undefeated at Cincinnati and then got hired at Notre Dame. And I thought Tennessee really missed the boat in not hiring Brian Kelly then.
You've mentioned that before, and I've thought about it. I still would have taken Lane Kiffin over Brian Kelly, but I didn't know that Lane Kiffin was going to leave after a year, obviously. And I didn't know, and I don't think Mike Hamilton knew that he was going to run afoul of the NCAA because he had been an NFL coach. So I didn't think that those two things you were proven right in retrospect. At the time, though, because I hate it when people say, oh, as I look back, hindsight 2020, and I would have done this. I believe you would have hired Brian Kelly. I want to be honest. I would have still hired Lane Kiffin over Kelly. But again, hindsight, you were absolutely correct. Third down. Will Heupel ever be considered the top coach in the SEC? Now, we're assuming that he stays at Tennessee, let's say until 2030. Everything's going well. Kirby Smart played at Georgia, so I don't think he's going anywhere. He seems like a grinder, so he could be at Georgia till 2030. Certainly things could change, but if I had predicted it would be that. I'll start. I don't think that Heupel will ever be considered the top coach in the SEC from year to year. Now, he might beat Smart one year and be on top of one of these rankings in an offseason, but he doesn't necessarily have to be to have great success. I don't think Philip Fulmer was ever considered the top coach in the SEC, even though I'm certain he won a Coach of the Year award. But as far as from year to year, you always thought of Spurrier, right? And I don't know that really changed. And then you thought of Urban Meyer. You thought of other guys.
You even thought of Mark Richt for a little while. Remember the early years of Georgia?
You did. You absolutely did. So do you think Heupel will ever be considered the top coach in the SEC on a year-to-year basis? Well, like Smart as Saban was.
No, because Smart's going to be there as long as he's at Tennessee. And again, Brian Kelly may be at LSU for his prime years at Tennessee. And like I just said, LSU, Brian Kelly, I don't know how – I think it's impossible for Tennessee to outdo what LSU can do with a good coach, no matter who Tennessee's coach is. And so that's my take on that.
On the message board, Spunky Mountain Red said, I think it's possible. I still have a slimy feeling about Smart. I do too. Talking to somebody with knowledge of both programs, I think there's a culture there that's going to turn a lot of people off. And I think there's a culture there that's going to lead to off-field issues. Now that may change, but usually once it gets out of hand, it's tough to get back. Fourth down, does Heupel get hurt in ranking by having a air quote gimmick offense?
I would have said no, but then when I looked at their top five, it's not that Brian Kelly and Dabo Swinney run pro-style offenses. They don't, but they don't really run gimmick offenses. So I'm like, but then again, I don't think it's hurting him because Lincoln Riley and Ryan Day are both in the top 10. Lincoln Riley basically runs Josh Heupel's offense at USC, and Ryan Day runs the spread. So, I don't think that hurts him.
I don't think it hurts him. I don't think it hurts him for those that really know what he does and the fact that they run the ball first. But I do think there will be some people who put together these lists that it will hurt him. They'll see the flash of the offense and they'll think that there's no substance there. It's a lot like, you remember Trooper Taylor, you remember Bruce Pearl. I used to always say to people who would get upset by their flashiness or their bravado, I would say there's substance behind the style in both cases. And I think you would agree that Bruce Pearl was ahead of the curve at the time with what he ran. And I think Trooper Taylor was an incredible hustler when it came, and I mean that in a good sense of the term, an incredible hustler when it came to recruiting. So I think there was substance behind the style. I think the same thing with Josh Heupel's offense. Do I think it will hurt him, though, from a national perspective? Yeah, probably. I think people looked at TCU and thought that they were soft, even though they ran the football like Tennessee did. So, yeah, I think it'll hurt him from a national perspective, but it shouldn't.
I can see that. And this list, by the way, you said TCU. It's funny. This list has Sonny Dykes at 12.
Yeah, see, I don't understand that. And I want to get into that. I mean, I don't understand how you can't have Sonny Dykes ahead of Josh Heupel.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't understand how you could have James Franklin ahead of Sonny Dykes, which they do.
Yeah, the 10 through 12 spot was Heupel, Franklin, Dykes.
Yeah, that was a weird one. And this is also, you're right, their value. They got Jimbo Fisher at 14. That's resume. That's just he's got a national championship, so we have to put him in there somewhere.
Yeah,
because there is not a person out right now. There's not a school that's on the rise. If I were to tell you right now, trade your coach for Jimbo Fisher, nobody who's happy with their program would do that.
Yep. On the message board, Travis says, absolutely, Heupel will be considered one of the best coaches in the SEC. Saban retires, Georgia disciplinary problems take over. Boom, Heupel dominates.
Brian Kelly, LSU. How's he going to get past him?
You would still have Brian Kelly at LSU, but I think what he says there is possible. From what I hear around Georgia's program, I think it's possible. I think there's an entitlement that's starting up at Georgia that they can get away with anything, and I think it kind of starts at the top. Smoky Mountain Red saying the gimmick saying gets thrown around too much, but if you win, call it what you want. I agree. Heupel is forcing coaches to change their everyday game plan. Coaches going for it on fourth on their side of the field in the first quarter. Agreed. John Hill says, gimmick. This gimmick worked at Missouri, UCF, and now Tennessee. Look at the offenses at these places when he was there and see the quarterback productivity. I completely agree with everything you're saying, John, but the simple fact is there's too much football on for everybody to watch. So when you have a national columnist put together these sorts of lists and rank coaches in the SEC, and he's not seeing the hunker down and get a yard on the goal line and score a touchdown in the red zone when you got to have it. They're seeing Jalen Hyatt score 5 touchdowns against Alabama. They're seeing some of the jet sweep stuff that they did last year. Princeton Fant lined up at fullback. Some of that stuff people are going to say is gimmicky. I don't think it is. I think it's taking advantage of the current rules, but I think it's going to be out there.